right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our 28th Annual Milken Institute Global Conference and for being here to kick off our philanthropy discussions this morning. It is such a pleasure to be here with you as well, David. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
In this moment, the role of philanthropy is being tested, not just by broader global instability, but by domestic political pressures here in the United States that are directly affecting the work that philanthropists do. So from proposed cuts to scientific and medical research to greater scrutiny and hostility towards terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're seeing a shift in how certain fields long supported by philanthropy are being both politicized and stigmatized. So this raises urgent questions about freedom and responsibility and resiliency of the philanthropic community. How does philanthropy adapt? How does it move forward? Especially when these headwinds feel not only strong, but paralyzing. And I can't think of a better person to help grapple with these questions than with David Rubenstein, who is the co-founder and co-chairman of the board of Carlyle, which is one of the world's most successful and largest private investment firms. He is also the chairman, the CEO, chairman, and principal owner of the Major League Baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles, which is what I watched growing up, a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the chairman of several boards, a recipient of the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy, an original signer of the Giving Pledge, so one of our country's most prolific philanthropists. So, David, thank you very much for all that you're doing.
All of you are here and skipping hearing the Secretary of Treasury. You're going to get to heaven more quickly than those people who go to listen to him, because you're going to learn more about philanthropy and get to heaven more quickly as a result of being here. So thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you, David. So let's start by talking about your patriotic philanthropy, as you say, that's focused on preserving American history. So being from Washington now, I appreciate very much your patriotic philanthropy, having restored and repaired the Washington Monument. You've purchased the Magna Carta that now sits in the National Archives, and you've done all of this to remind people of the history and the heritage of our country that has provided you with considerable opportunity. So my first question for you is, how do you navigate the risk of even historical preservation being interpreted through a partisan lens? And I'm thinking of high-profile examples, of course, such as the Kennedy Center, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which have been in the crosshairs of executive orders, threatening to pull federal funding for content that promotes divisive race-centered ideology or anti-American propaganda. So do you feel a responsibility to fund projects that promote a more inclusive or pluralistic telling of U.S. history?
Well, the big issue has historically been, should you restore the Jefferson Memorial? Jefferson was a slave owner and owned 700 slaves, so some people say, well, why do something for Jefferson? Similarly, people would say, why do something for Robert E. Lee? There was the Custis Lee Mansion at the top of Arlington. Why restore that? Robert E. Lee was a slave owner, and not only that, led the Confederate forces, which is, violation of our Constitution. I think generally you should try to honor people for things they've done that are good, and if there are some things that are bad and you're honoring them for the bad things, that's not such a great idea. Many of the Confederate generals who have monuments dedicated to them were erected in the early part of the 20th century, when they were really trying to say the Civil War was wrongly won by the North, and they were trying to honor Confederate generals. And it was 1972 that Stone Mountain in Georgia had a relief of Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and so forth, and the Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew, went to dedicate it. So I don't think that was an appropriate thing, and I think if you have something for Jefferson, and you're honoring him because he wrote the Declaration of Independence, the third President of the United States, that's okay. You should also, though, let people know about the warts of all of these individuals. All individuals have warts. Washington was a slave owner, too. So I think now we're under challenge not because we're honoring people that had some warts, but because the whole zeitgeist of the era seems to be changing. So, for example, the Kennedy Center was set up to honor President Kennedy and honor the arts, the performing arts. Now it seems to be in different situation. The African American History and Culture Museum was set up to honor what African Americans have done for our country over many, many years as slaves and as freed people. but now it's under attack, and some people would like to close it down completely. I think what you have to do is be fairly resolute and not let the administration in power at any given time change your views on what's right and what's wrong. Everybody should have their own moral compass and not shrink just because somebody in office all of a sudden says that DEI is anti-American. And so in my own case, I'm still supporting things I supported before. I'm not shrinking from them. And if somebody has a different view, they can have a different view. There was something on the internet the other day that said that I was anti-American because I had given something to the National Archives. What was it? It was a copy of the Bill of Rights. And the idea was that the Bill of Rights was going to infect the Americans because they were going to see these 10 Bill of Rights documents. So you just have to ignore some of this stuff and be resolute. On the other hand, you can't ignore the fact that there are people out there who are interested in violence. So if you were attacked the police on January the 6th in 2021, and now you've been pardoned and you are free from any criminal responsibility or liability, why would you not be afraid of attacking somebody else that does something that you think is anti-American? So there are threats to many people these days, and many members of Congress and other people in the philanthropy world who are being told you shouldn't do that or you can't do that or we'll come after you. And I think it's an unfortunate situation.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for being resolute. Let's talk a little bit about the United States is the most philanthropic country in the world. We give away over $550 billion a year. What is at stake if the tax exemption and 501(c)(3) status is lost by some of our nonprofit organizations?
The United States likes to say that it's the most philanthropic country in the world, and by some measurements it is. We give roughly 2% of GDP to philanthropy every year, but 40% of that is going to religious organizations. So you could argue that people are buying their way into heaven because they're giving money to their church or their synagogue or something. But we also have a tax deduction. If we eliminated the tax deduction, the amount of money given to philanthropy would go down dramatically. Many countries do not have a tax deduction, and therefore their numbers are much smaller than ours. All that said, I think the United States began with the tradition of philanthropy. When the country was started, we didn't have wealthy government, we didn't have a wealthy church that funded things as it did in Europe. So now we began many, many years ago from the beginning of the country to kind of have volunteer groups and volunteer fire departments, volunteer libraries, and other things, and we began a tradition of philanthropy, and it was in effect put in the statute by giving a tax deduction when the tax laws came into effect, as the income tax law came into effect. I think right now philanthropy is under challenge because many people are saying, well, what happens if the organization I give money to doesn't have a tax deduction anymore? There's been a threat to take away the tax deduction of Harvard. And if that were to happen, other universities might be seen as appropriate targets as well. I don't think that will happen in the end. I'm going to interview the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee next week in Washington, and I'll ask him about whether or not, in fact, the Congress is concerned about taking away the tax deduction of organizations that I think do good things for the United States, like Harvard University or other major universities. But I am not happy that right now philanthropy is under attack, and many philanthropists may just say, the stock market's down, I don't know where the economy is going, I'm not as wealthy as I used to be, the organization I want to give money to get attacked, so I'll just sit on my money, and that's a real risk.
So we know that we're in a society that is divided right now, that is polarized. It certainly feels palpable in Washington, D.C. for sure. Do you feel that either your philanthropy or philanthropy in general can help to bridge this divide? And it seemed like for a fleeting moment we had consensus in Washington to bring 2 new pandas from China to the National Zoo. And you've said, politics, laws, and regulations are no doubt the lifeblood of Washington, but the soul of the city seems to be the pandas. And you have long supported this effort. Is there hope for more kinds of panda diplomacy from philanthropic support?
Well, pandas were given by Mao Zedong to Richard Nixon, and we in turn gave some animals to the United States to Mao Zedong as a gift in 1972. And those pandas lived for 20 years. When they died, the Chinese didn't have a program for diplomacy then, but they subsequently began a program to lend, in effect, or rent pandas to 27 zoos around the world. You rented 2 pandas a year for roughly $1 million or $2 million a year. And I supported that at the National Zoo because I was chairman of the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian owns the National Zoo. Then when the U.S.-Chinese relationships went south, the pandas were left the United States, and there were no pandas in most of the zoos here. There were only 4 pandas. There were only 4 zoos that had pandas, and in 3 of those zoos, the pandas went back. We now have the pandas back in Washington as a result, I think, of the Chinese trying to restore some good diplomacy. It's not completely clear why pandas are so popular. They're only from northern China. I suspect it's because they look friendly. They just sit there and eat all day, and they have a stomach that's designed to eat vegetables, or meat, I should say, but they eat vegetables, and therefore they have to eat a lot, and they eat 11 hours a day. And if you eat 11 hours a day, you sleep about 10 hours a day. So if you add that together, that's about 22 hours, 21 hours a day where you're just either eating or you're sleeping. So not that much that they can do the rest of the day. They have the most difficult reproductive system in the mammal world, and it's very difficult for the pandas to reproduce. And as a result, there are only about 2,000 pandas in the entire world. So it's likely that 100, 200, 300 years from now, there won't be any more pandas. People seem to like them because of the black and white fur, and they seem to be cuddly because they sit there. They don't look like they're harming anybody. But if you went into a cage with a panda, they would kill you. They weigh 350 pounds, and they look nice, but no zookeeper can go in with an adult panda in a cage. So you have to be careful. They are bears.
Noted. Don't go in the panda cage. The National Zoo. I want to come back to one of your previous comments about if we see a retrenchment of philanthropy, and certainly we're seeing funding pulled from federal library and museum programs, the dismantling of the U.S. Institute for Peace. What can and should philanthropy be doing? How do they create more ecosystems for support for these kinds of institutions?
As a general rule of thumb, many things associated with the federal government are seen as things the federal government should fund. So when I started funding things like the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, Jefferson Memorial, the rehabilitation of them, people said, why are you doing that? Because the federal government paid for it. Turns out the federal government doesn't pay for a lot of things, and as a result, some things are in disrepair. We're now redoing the Lincoln Memorial, and we're building an underground education center. So for the first time when you go to Lincoln Memorial, you can go and actually learn something about Lincoln as opposed to just see the big memorial. The federal government doesn't make it its highest priority, fixing federal monuments and memorials. But the real question is, why fix any monument or memorial? Who cares about these anyway? We have to get on with our life. We have to educate our children. We have to move forward with life. Why care about monuments and memorials? Well, my answer is this. The human brain has evolved in a certain way, and it's brilliant in what has happened. We came out of caves 400,000 years ago. We had lots of challenges in living past the age of 20. The average age was 20 that you lived to in 400,000 years ago. Now we live much longer for medical and other reasons, health reasons and so forth, medicine reasons, sanitation reasons. But the human brain has evolved in certain ways, and it's brilliant the way it's evolved over 400,000 years. You've got Shakespeare, Picasso, Einstein, incredible things the human brain has come up with. But one thing it hasn't done yet, it hasn't yet made it looking at a computer screen the same as looking at something in person. So if you see the Washington Monument, Mount Vernon, the Lincoln Memorial in person, you're more likely to learn about the country's history than if you just see it on a computer slide. Maybe in 100 or 200 or 300 years from now, seeing something on a computer slide will be the same as seeing it in person. But if you see the Magna Carta in person, you're more likely to have an education about it when you're there from the curator. You're more likely to read about it later. And the result will be you're more likely to learn about American history. Right now, we don't really know much about American history because we don't teach civics so much anymore. And the result is you have, in 49 out of 50 states, native-born Americans cannot pass the basic citizenship test that foreigners have to take in order to become a citizen of the United States. 49 out of 50 states, a majority of Americans couldn't pass the basic citizenship test that foreigners have to take. And only one state, Vermont, could a bare majority pass it. And why does that matter? Well, the theory behind history is if you don't know the past, you're condemned to relive it in the future. The theory of evolution is you progress forward as you make your as humans progress and all animals progress, you progress forward and you take the bad genes and the bad weaknesses and they go away and you get the stronger ones. The same is true in civilization. You want to get the bad behind you and the good ahead of you. And the best way to know about what the good things are is to learn about history. And so that's why we should learn more about history. Currently, we have parents who are obsessed with STEM. And in the year 2000, the National Science Foundation came up with a wonderful acronym, STEM. science, technology, engineering, and math. And the result of that was that every parent said, well, I want to have my little boy Johnny or little girl Jane learn STEM subjects because they can get a job at Google or Goldman Sachs or something like that. I don't want them majoring in social sciences or English because they might not get a job at a good place like Microsoft or something. The result is that history majors, when I was in college, were about 8 or 9% of the majors in United States colleges. Now it's about 1.5%. The result is we don't know much about our own history. And if you go to a school in China, they have courses for young kids in American history that are much more in-depth than we have in our own schools about American history. So if you talk to an average Chinese student at 12, 13, 14 years old, they know much more about our history than we know about our history. And I think that's not a good thing.
So, David, with the 250th anniversary of our country coming upon us, how is that an opportunity to change that? Or what, is there an opportunity to spur more philanthropy? What's it mean for your patriotic philanthropy?
Well, we're celebrating the 250th. It's interesting we're celebrating. We're celebrating because of July the 4th. We agreed to the text of the Declaration of Independence. There's nothing wrong with that, but we should remember that was just a propaganda document that was designed to say why we're starting this country. We didn't really become a real country until the Constitution was ratified much later. But leaving that aside, I'm happy to celebrate the 250th. But I think people should not just go to a party and just look for fireworks. They should take advantage of it and actually learn something about the country's history, how we came into being, why we have the Bill of Rights, why we have a Constitution, and actually try to make sure we understand what the principles behind these documents are and try to live up to these principles, which is increasingly a problem.
Yeah. David, you often remind us that the definition of the word philanthropy comes from love from humanity. And you've also made the point over the years that giving philanthropy and giving philanthropy is not just for the wealthy, right? Everyone can engage in this.
Yeah.
You can give of your time, your talent, your ties. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that and how everyone can be part of philanthropy.
The Giving Pledge was set up. It's a nice organization. It's a voluntary thing. You don't go to hell if you sign up for the Giving Pledge. You don't honor it. You're supposed to give away half your net worth during your lifetime or upon your death. And of course, if you give away no money during your lifetime and you say you're going to give it away upon your death, and when you die you don't give it away, there's nothing we can do about it. It's a voluntary organization. You may go to heaven, you may not. Who knows? But one of the challenges I've had with the Giving Pledge is that you have to have a net worth of $1 billion to be in it. And it implies to people that if you're not worth $1 billion, you shouldn't be engaged in philanthropy. When we should get more and more people engaged who are not billionaires and get average people to be engaged. And I also like to remind people that the word philanthropy is derived from an ancient Greek word that means loving humanity. It doesn't mean rich people writing checks. And you can love humanity by giving the most valuable thing you have, which is your time. You can always make more money if you're in the business world or so forth. You can't make more time. You have a finite amount of time on the planet Earth. And therefore, I tell people we should try to honor people who give away their time as much as people give away their money. And people should always think, what more can they do with their time to give back to the country and give back to civilization? Not can they do only with their money. And so that's the point I try to convey to people. And I also think we should try, the Giving Pledge and other organizations, to honor people that give away smaller sums, but a larger percentage of their net worth. So for a billionaire to give away, $1 million isn't all that difficult a thing for him to do or her to do. If somebody is worth a lot less and they give away a bigger percentage of net worth, that should be honored. And with respect to the 250th, it's a good occasion to remind people of the history of the country, and I think we should do it, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's so many other things that aren't really related to the 250th that we shouldn't stop giving money to.
Great. So my last question for you, David. You're a thought leader, you're a voice of reason, of sanity and stability in increasingly choppy waters. What do you recommend for philanthropists, whether they're institutional funders, individuals? We've got heads of corporate foundations that are about to join us on stage. What is your advice as to how to steer through these choppy waters and or trim their sails to the wind?
In addition to giving to the Milken Foundation, you mean?
I didn't ask him to say that.
So I would say that people should figure out what they want to get out of life. The theory behind living is that it's supposed to be an enjoyable undertaking, and people should actually figure out what they want to get out of life. And to me, as Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, part of life is about the pursuit of happiness. Happiness is the most elusive thing in human endeavor. Being happy is not that easy. Very, very difficult. And the richer you are, generally the less happy you are. Not always. But some of the most tortured souls in the world are very rich people. And so figure out what makes you happy. And as a general rule of thumb, I think people who give away their money and their time will probably be happier in the end. And if you want to think about it, and you're selfishly thinking about it, if you're happy, you're more likely to live longer. Grouchy people don't live as long. Happy people live longer. And so give away your money and your time. You're more likely to live longer, and hopefully that'll produce more happiness for you and your family.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. It's always a pleasure to be in conversation with you. I appreciate your wisdom, your wit. Give of your time, become happy, stay away from, don't go in the panda cage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back with part 2 of our conversation. Thank you.
Okay.